Today on Locked On Canadiens, it's a defense special. We're going to talk about Lane Hutson, whether there's a contract coming. We're going to talk about defensive depth and our ideal pairings, and then what happens if somebody gets traded at some point this season in a curveball.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. My name is Laura Saab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. As you know, we are your daily podcast as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are down to our summer schedule where it's 3 days a week, usually Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And today we're doing a defense special. Ian, are you ready to talk about the Habs defense?
Yeah, let's do what most people do online when they're in an argument. They don't have a good argument and get really defensive. So let's work on our defense here.
Let's do that. So in our first segment, we'll talk about Lane Hutson and potential upcoming contract. And then in our second segment, we're going to extrapolate from a mailbag question we got from a loyal listener about the defense depth and whether Struble can push Reinbacher out, can push Xhekaj out, what it means for Reinbacher. And then in our final segment, we're going to talk about what happens if there's a wild card. Let's say somebody who's not expected to make the team does, or a curveball. Let's say someone is traded. So it is the defense special. Let's start with Lane Hutson. Ian, this morning, our other member of this family, Scott Matla, sent us a quote from Elliot Friedman. And the general feeling there is that if there is a Lane Hutson extension coming soon, it's going to come in at around the same dollar amount, or the same, I guess, length too, as Noah Dobson.
Yeah, I have the line here. It was Elliot Friedman in 32 Thoughts. He says, "I think with the cap going up, the market is getting reset. Initially, the Canadiens probably wanted him under Nick Suzuki, and now you look at the deal Noah Dobson signed. If Hutson is going to sign for term, it's probably going to be closer to Dobson. Of course, Dobson coming in at 8 years, $9.5 million. Can I just say that I have a hard time believing this. Not that I think that the numbers are true or not true, but if these were the numbers, I think this would be done. I think the Canadiens would be like, bet, here's $9.5 million. Because in a few years, that's going to be a steal of a contract. Much like we've said about Noah Dobson, and Hutson has way higher offensive potential. I think that's going to be a steal.
Yes.
If that's what Hutson wants, it'd be done. So I have a hard time believing that, in the sense that I think Hudson's going to play out this year and next year command way more money, unless he wants to be that hockey guy that we all think he is. And I just want to get this done so I can play hockey. Right?
So, okay, let's start from the Nick Suzuki part, right? So we're way past the time where Nick Suzuki was the highest paid player on this team. And I think a lot of us have psychologically and emotionally not moved on from that. We've not moved beyond that. We're still why are all these people on this team now making more than Nick Suzuki? A couple of them got traded in, right? I guess Noah Dobson, it was more, the Canadiens obviously were happy with that contract when it was a sign and trade, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking at just cap hit, we passed that twice already with players who have a higher cap hit than Nick Suzuki. Patrick Laine, which, if you remember, Ken Hughes was asked in the press conference after acquiring Patrick Laine, hey, you've had everybody come in under Nick Suzuki's number, and now you have a guy that came in over it. And I remember Ken Hughes' his immediate response was, well, we didn't sign that contract. So it kind of gave some validity to that they wanted guys to come in under Nick Suzuki's number.
Yes.
I think in the rising cap world, though, the cap hit is not what we can look at as the barometer for this, because, and as Reddit user 1986 points out, Suzuki signed for 9.55% of the cap at the time he signed his contract. If Hutson signs for 9.55% starting next year, it'll be an estimated $9.93 million deal.
Which is
So
still good for me, but we'll get into that in 1 second. Let's
yeah,
finish with Nick Suzuki first.
right. And I find this funny too. You know, Kent Hughes says, "Well, we didn't sign the Patrick Laine contract. You didn't sign the Nick Suzuki contract either.
Yeah.
That wasn't Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon. That was Mark Bergevin's regime.
Yes.
So like I find that funny that they're setting that. And look, they've done a masterful job allowing themselves to be able to think we can get all these guys in under Suzuki because they've done it. Like
Yes.
Caulfield, Guhle, Slavkovsky, all of them coming in under,
Under
what
Nick Suzuki.
thought
Yes.
he would have had.
Yeah. And to me, like what I think about now is that all of these guys, the challenge is not getting them under Nick Suzuki right now, or most of these guys. It's when their contracts are up for renewal and they've proven something, right? So for me, the way that my confidence in Nick Suzuki is that when the time comes to renew his contract, there's going to be like a contending team, right? There's going to be things that he's done with his career that merit not just an increase, but also like a little bit of making up for the fact that this happened at this time, right? There's going to be some retroactive compensation involved in there for his next contract, which I have absolutely no problem with. The problem that I have is that when all of these guys come up and the Canadiens are either in their contention era or they've already won or they're about to win, like that's the problem that I'm worrying about, right? And I know it's like 7 years from now, but I'm not worried today. I'm worried 7 years from now, essentially.
Sure. And the cap world is going to be much different then. I mean, 7 years from now, we're looking at potentially Ivan Demidov, if he signs what will be a max contract at that point, 7 years, because they're changing that in the next CBA.
Yeah.
He'll be just at the end of that. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Yuri Slavkovsky, Caden Guhle, all those guys will be at the end of their deals too. They'd all have to be re-signed. You would hope that they would stagger those a little bit and get those done at different times. But with the cap going up, you're going to be, if you continue to sign these value deals for these young players now, you're setting yourselves up to be able to keep all of those guys later. So that's why I think the Canadiens, I said they've done a masterful job with their young core and getting them signed. When it comes to this Hutson thing, if Hutson comes in and says, I want the Dobson contract, the Canadiens could not get him to sign it faster. Like, I don't think if that's what this was, in my gut, I feel like it'd be over. We would be talking about how many cups they're going to win in the next 8 years. Like that's the conversation we'd be having right now. Not, is he going to sign this contract? I really just think he plays out the year and we sign him next summer.
Okay. So here, like, let's say it's this summer. It's this summer, right? And you are Lane Hutson's agent. What are you asking for?
It probably starts with 10.
I would say 11. I would say I'm the agent. I come in saying I want 11, right? And if you're Kent Hughes, what are you responding back?
Probably 9.
Right.
And you're going to meet somewhere in the middle, probably around 10.48 so he can put his jersey number in there and we move on. But for right now, like the thing is, the aspect of this that I think hurts the Canadiens with the cap, with the CBA changing, is that whether he signs an 8-year deal this summer or a 7-year deal next summer, it expires at the same time. You're not buying any more UFA years, right?
Yes.
You're, like Noah Dobson with his contract, you're buying way more UFA years because he's just further along in his career. But because the Canadiens are going from, they can give him an 8 now or a 7 next year, it'll expire at the same time. They're not buying any other years. Yes. So like that aspect of what's changing in the CBA is hurting them in this particular instance. I don't know that that's going to matter all that much. I think Hutson just realizes that he's probably going to have 2 really big, chances to strike big. If he does a max term contract, he'll do it once, this summer or next summer, and then once 8 years from now. And then that'll kind of, from that point on, it'll just be residual contracts towards the end. But like these players only have a certain amount of time to make this money, right? Like we need to remember, like there's only so many times a player comes to a point where they can command this amount of money. And, if I'm Lane Hutson's agent, that's kind of what I'm advising him to do. And as somebody who wants the players to get what the players deserve, it's kind of what I would advise Hutson to do.
Also, okay. So as a fan, what do you think is like what are we what are we laughing all the way to the bank with? Like for me, it's anything under 10.
Yeah, hilarious. It's
Yeah.
you keep him under 10. Like that post I pointed out, the comment that said a $9.93 million contract would be what the cap percentage that Nick Suzuki got. So like if you're coming in at what Nick Suzuki's cap percentage was, you nailed it. Like that's a fantastic contract. But again, I'll reiterate this, I'm beating a dead horse here. If that was available to Lane Hutson and Lane Hutson wanted it, this would be done.
Yes.
Like I just have a hard time believing that that's the case.
And you never know. Kent Hughes could surprise us.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if I'm Lane Hutson's agent, I'm coming in saying you asked for 11, right?
Yeah.
We're asking for this is how we're starting the negotiations. Anyways, so we'll keep an eye on that. We do think that Lane Hutson does just want to play hockey and get it over with. So there is some hope there. At the same time, he does have so much potential. So it could be a little bit dicey in terms of cap hit. In the meantime, we want to talk about the rest of the defense. We got a mailbag question last week that we want to spend a little bit more time on. We'll do that. And then we're going to talk about what happens if someone gets traded in the middle of the season. And that's all coming up next on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. For me, I think the biggest thing was it was an eye-opener as to where all my money was going, right? All those little things, all those little treats I was buying myself were not really helping my financial future. And one thing that I really, really do want to get serious about is investing, in my future wealth. So Monarch Money has really, really been the game changer for me. And you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, so we have one of our loyal, longtime listeners, good friend of the show, Jacques Facepunch, who sent us a mailbag question last week that we wanted to postpone to this week so we would have a little bit more time to discuss. And the mailbag question itself is the following. To what extent is trading Matheson dependent on Reinbacher's emergence, and is there a possibility that Matheson goes before Reinbacher comes up, leaving Xhekaj and Struble as a potential third pair? That would potentially leave RD as Hutson, Dobson, Guhle, Carrier, Xhekaj, and Struble. There would be left-right issues, but it would be a great mix of size, skill, and grit. So I think we do kind of we talked about it a little bit when Struble signed, but we should talk a little bit about whether signing Struble pushes Matheson out of the lineup as opposed to Xhekaj, because the assumption we've been operating under is that there is a spot available to one of those two players and they have to grab it.
Yeah, I think I don't know that Reinbacher's entrance to the NHL and Matheson's spot on the team are interrelated. I don't know that they're connected. I think the player who is, if this person makes a jump at training camp, might put Mike Matheson's roster spot in jeopardy, is Adam Engstrom. And I'm not saying that I think that's a fairly low percentage of happening for what it's worth. Like, I love this player in Adam Engstrom, but the camp he would need to have to unseat a player like Mike Matheson would need to be astronomical. Like, it would have to be, we've never seen a camp this good from any player before. I just think that that's a better player comparison. Like, is Reinbacher going to be able to step in and do the things that Mike Matheson does the way that Mike Matheson does them? No. Maybe Engstrom can at some point in his career. I have a hard time believing that somebody is going to take this spot away from Mike Matheson. I think that that's going to be either a decision that the Canadiens make ahead of camp. Again, I'm still focusing on the beginning of September for when stuff might get real with the Canadiens. They're going to move that Carey Price contract to make room to get them back under the salary cap, and then try to make a move elsewhere, I'd imagine. I would think that that's holding up a lot of the work the Canadiens are trying to do. So I don't necessarily, to answer the first part of this question, I don't necessarily think that Mike Matheson's fate is tied in any way to David Reinbacher. I just think that they'd be different. They'd be different pieces, because then you have to think of it this way, right? Like, are you putting Reinbacher on the second pair immediately to play with Hutson? Maybe. That's a lot to ask. A second-year small defenseman who I know is incredible and is going to be a perennial Norris Trophy candidate eventually. But that's a lot to ask of Reinbacher. So I'm just like, I think Matheson is a very nice security blanket for the Canadiens to have this season, and they're not committed to him beyond this season.
Yeah, and you asked, is Reinbacher going to step in and be able to do the things that Mike Matheson does in the way that he does them? Like, that's not why they got him, right? Like,
right.
And I don't mean like necessarily like as a Mike Matheson specific replacement, as they didn't get Reinbacher to do things like that, right?
No.
They got Reinbacher to be a defenseman, to be a defensive defenseman, right? That's what they got him for. And they got him to balance out the offensive defensemen they have on this roster. Now, I think it actually would be really fun and educational for Reinbacher to play with Matheson. So maybe let's get into that. Let's get into like our ideal defensive pairings for next season, assuming that Adam Engstrom does not unseat Mike Matheson.
Yeah, the one that is etched in stone for me immediately, and I think we're aligned on this. I know Kay and I were aligned when we talked about this a week or so ago. Guhle-Dobson.
Yes.
Just rules. I think that is an out-of-the-box number one defensive pairing. Yeah. I'm so excited to see it.
And it's also like, all the criticisms of Dobson, well, like Guhle can do that, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. They complement each other very well. Like Guhle's offensive upside we know is kind of limited. Well, play him with this guy. Like, I think it's fantastic. And Guhle gets to go back to playing his regular side. There's so much to love about that pair. Like, there's just, it's every time I think about it, I think of something new where I'm like, oh, this is going to rule, actually.
I'm on board, 100% on board. So here's my ideal defensive pairing next year. And I know what we just said, we're not putting David Reinbacher on that second pair with Lane Hutson right away. But I want to say, like, a third of the way through the season, that's what I want to see for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I see that.
So then who do you play with him at the beginning?
Yeah, the thing is I think if I'm looking at my ideal defensive pairs for this upcoming season for the Canadiens, I don't know that Reinbacher's on them. And that's not to say that I don't believe in the player. I just think that, asking him to step in and do what he needs to do. Okay, I don't think he fits at this moment in time. And I'll tell you why. Because, okay, if you're playing Reinbacher in this lineup, you are probably going to need to play him on the third pair. I don't think he can immediately come in and be a second pair defenseman. Okay, so that means he's on the third pair, which means your second pair is now Carrier-Hutson, which is a very small pair, right? Like, you don't want to have to do that. And then you've got, one of Xhekaj and Struble playing with Reinbacher, probably Xhekaj, just so he can protect him. Right, the whole enforcer concept. So, like, I think because otherwise, like, it just doesn't really seem to fit for me. Like, it seems like they'd be forcing him into the lineup instead of just letting this naturally occur. Of course, there could be another move involved, but like, to me, watching this play out, I'm just sort of like, you could play him. It would be a mess. Like, you would have to solve a bunch of other issues. Again, if Reinbacher steps into camp and has a fantastic camp and forces the Canadiens' hand, let's have that conversation. But for now, I'm totally fine letting him go to Laval, play number 1 minutes in Laval. Again, we haven't seen him all that much in North America,
he's been injured.
Yeah. So I'm fine letting that play out. I know people are excited. I'm excited. Trust the process. We have to get there the right way. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is the right way.
I think the Canadiens aren't going to rush him, but I don't know. Maybe they think that he's ready faster than we do, right? Or maybe they want this to happen. They want their growing pains to happen this year because next year, as you said, stuff gets real. But also, where do we put Matheson in this scenario? We still have Matheson on this team.
I would go Matheson-Hutson, second pair. I know that's going to drive people nuts. You play Matheson on the left, Hutson can play the right. You let that play out for a little bit. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. But Hutson and Matheson has worked. Mm-hmm. Statistically, it's done very well.
So then now you're alternating Carrier, sorry, you have Carrier, and then you're alternating Xhekaj and Struble for the year until one of them grabs the spot.
I think it's going to be Xhekaj because I think the Canadiens. I think of Xhekaj as the more long-term fit in Montreal than Struble, but injuries happen. Struble's a great guy to have to come in and play due to injury. Ideally, they would have a Pezzetta type on defense to be able to just sit as the 13th or as the 7th defenseman rather.
Yeah.
But they don't, and they don't have the room for it because they have too many of these guys that they like. So It'll be a dance. It'll be a challenge to get that to fit. Again, I think the camp is going to decide which of Xhekaj and Struble they want to use on opening night.
And speaking of that, what we're going to talk about is what if there's a curveball? What if there's a surprise trade? What if there's a surprise person that snatches that spot out of camp? And we're going to get into that right up next. All right. So before we get into our segment, we do want to remind everybody about our contest. There is still time to enter for the Josh Anderson signed picture that Ian has and is proudly displaying on YouTube right now. So we have hit our goal for Josh Anderson, which is 4,500 subscribers. But you can still enter because we're going to be doing the draw for our Wednesday episode. So let's say up until Tuesday lunchtime, you still have an opportunity to subscribe and enter the contest. All you have to do is subscribe on YouTube and leave a comment saying you're interested in winning this picture. Say something like contest entry, I'd like to win the picture, etc., etc. However, everybody who enters for this draw, minus the winner, will still be eligible for the Arbor Xhekaj signed picture, which we will be giving away at 5,000 YouTube subscribers. And there he is looking, I'm going to say he looks princely. He looks regal in that picture. It's very majestic. I agree. Yeah. So anyway, so Ian has signed memorabilia. He needs to give them away. He has too much stuff. So take his stuff away. So our draw for Josh Anderson will be on Tuesday evening. So please enter by Tuesday noon Eastern time. And we will consider all the entries for that. And then we will remove the winner from the pool and continue to consider all of you guys for the Xhekaj picture as well. And we want to thank you all for subscribing as well. We've been really excited to provide this content for you. And we love it. We love that you guys are also excited about this Josh Anderson picture because it's very handsome. All right, getting back to handsomeness, Alex Carrier. No, let's talk about curveball. So I think the biggest curveball that I have been expecting is not somebody making the team out of camp. It is more that the Canadiens might trade Mike Matheson early in the season. What do you think the chances of that happening are?
That would need a few things to happen, I think. They would need both Struble and Xhekaj to show beyond a reasonable doubt that they are NHLers and deserve regular spots in the roster, right? And then you have the option to go Struble Hutson again, which worked. It worked pretty well. You have that option again. You would also need, I think, some pressure from a player in the American Hockey League. I keep saying Adam Engstrom. Maybe at that point it could be a Reinbacher, but again, they're not going to call Reinbacher up to sit. Like they need a roster spot for him. They want him playing. So I think it would have to be a variety of factors. And there would have to be another team out there who would need a player like a Mike Matheson on their roster. Or a team that potentially sees themselves as sellers later on, and maybe they can give up a part now for a piece in Mike Matheson that may be more valuable at the trade deadline. Like I think of the summer the year the Canadiens got Thomas Vanek. Thomas Vanek was traded twice that season. It was Buffalo to the Islanders, and the Islanders went, "Oh crap, we're not good," and then had to trade him at the deadline as well. So I think if we're looking at a trade early on, I think it's either guys have played so well we have to make space, or somebody has disappointed to such a great degree that we need to improve. Like a la, Barron for Carrier, right? Like that's the sort of roadmap I'm looking at for that. Any kind of deal that looks like that.
So then here's my next question. You brought it up in our previous segment. Like, what if Adam Engstrom makes the team? Or I guess the answer to that is you find a way to trade Matheson. But is there another guy you think is possible can crack this roster? Because for me, it's only David Reinbacher. Like I even forgot about Adam Engstrom until you brought him up.
Yeah, the other guy would have been Logan Mailloux, right? Like he would have been the next in line, the heir apparent to the Matheson spot.
Yes.
And he's no longer in the equation for Montreal. So like that becomes, there's less of a logjam, so to speak, in the American Hockey League. It's really two guys. It's really Engstrom and Reinbacher are in a tier of their, it's really Reinbacher in a tier of his own, Engstrom right below him. And then, the rest of whatever defense they have going on in Laval. Like, I don't think that any of those guys are going to be like, oh my God, we have to watch for this guy in camp. He could steal a roster spot. So to that end, like there's not a lot of external pressure, knocking on the door for the Canadiens on defense to say like, we're going to take one of us is going to take your spot.
Yeah.
I think like they would have to prove that they are everyday NHLers to steal spots from the Mathesons of the world, the Strubles, the Xhekais. I just, I have a hard time believing that the Canadiens would say, Reinbacher, you've made the team. You're a seventh defenseman. Like that's not a good use of that player's time and development.
I thought you were going to say that's not a thing.
It isn't a thing. Like nobody should do that. That's a silly, stupid self error. Like there's no reason for that.
Yes, absolutely. So honestly, like I feel like one of the things that Montreal Canadiens fans sometimes underestimate is the value that somebody like Mike Matheson could bring to the table if they do trade him. I still don't see who replaces him. I still don't see who does the things that he does for the Montreal Canadiens. It just does not. It does not compute.
I mean, I kind of think Dobson is that guy. Like the way that Islanders fans talk about Dobson, doesn't that sound like Matheson?
Just like younger and better.
Yeah, younger, way more offensive potential, but like the defensive gaffes that they talk about, like we live that with Mike Matheson. That's not, unheard of here. So I think, we always talk, we mentioned it when they got Dobson was, we always talked about people who wanted to get rid of Mike Matheson, and we would always caution them, you need somebody who can do what he does. Now you kind of have somebody who can do what Matheson of 2 years ago did. Not so much Matheson last year because he turned into a defensive specialist, right? He was a penalty killer, a really good one at that. Like he was really relied on in that role. But I also like just looking around that defense. I think that there's veteran value that he still has, because if he leaves, who's the most tenured defenseman there? Is it Carrier? I think it's Carrier and then Guhle. Like,
and then Guhle.
That's not great from a veteran standpoint. I know this team is taking the next step, but like there's value in having a guy like that around.
At least for the next year, at least until he plays out his contract. Maybe they trade him at the deadline if they're not good.
Yeah, and I just like, if you're trading Matheson, what are you trading him for?
Exactly.
Like draft capital for what? Like, so you can potentially make a move at the deadline to get something else? Well, why don't you just try to get that something else now? You're not trading Matheson for a second line center, at least not 1-for-1. And if you are, that other general manager should probably be fired. But so I know everybody's since Matheson got here, they've been on a hair trigger for trading this guy. And I'm trying to find a way that it makes sense. And
it does not.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling. Like maybe we get to a point in camp where we look at the roster and we go, yeah, it makes sense to trade him now. But as of August 4th, I don't really have a reason to do that.
Absolutely. I don't know. I feel like, we hear about it so much. Trade him. We've started to hear a lot about trading Slafkovsky, which I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about.
That's crazy.
I know.
They're not doing that.
We're not going there. The Montreal Canadiens will not be doing this. Anyways, it is time for our trivia. Ian, what have you got?
All right, let's do last week's question. This former Habs goalie played on only one game with Montreal, celebrated his birthday on Friday. Do you remember the answer to this one, Laura?
It was Marc Denis.
Marc Denis, RDS fame. I didn't realize he only played one game in Montreal. I find that to be very funny that he played one game in Montreal and now he's broadcasted infinitely more games with the Canadiens than he played them.
Yeah, but he's also like former Montreal Canadian Marc Denis. Like when people talk about it.
I mean, that's more than what Habs on TSN can say. Like what's our intermission? Oh, Marty Biron, cool. Carlo Koliakovo, fine. Like none of it makes any sense.
Weren't Habs.
Bunch of guys. I do like Frankie Corrado though. He's not a Hab, but he's a Hab at heart. I believe it. Yes. The correct answer was given to us from Super Rain. Alexandra Angers Lusto, I believe that's how that's pronounced, and Roger Conrad. So thanks for playing and for continuing to get our trivia right. Today's question, today, Monday, August 4th, is Maurice Richard's birthday, Habs royalty. He'd be 104 years old today. In his honor, here's today's question. In the 1944-45 season, Richard became the first 50-50 player in NHL history. So 50 goals in 50 games in a season that only had 50 games. Which team did Richard score his most against that season? Who did he do the most damage against in that 50-50 season? If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below this video. Send it to us any way you know how, and we'll give you a shout out on the next episode of the show.
And you heard the man. Here's the ways you know how. You can reach us, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can leave your trivia answer in the YouTube comments if you're listening to this episode on YouTube. You can find us all over social media. We are on TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Locked On Canadiens. So you can reach us there and give us your trivia answer, but you can also send us mailbag questions on there. We welcome them. I do want to apologize. There was a listener who I did not see the question in time, who asked us if he should take his Demidov jersey to a Jays weekend in Toronto, and we didn't answer in time, and he didn't take the jersey. But the answer to that is always going to be yes. An Ivan Demidov jersey is never out of place anywhere. Anyway. So those are all the ways you can reach us. And please ensure that you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You will find my co-host at, maybe it's Ian all over social media. You will find me at The Active Stick. I want to thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.